Hey, Dr. Clark here, coming back at you with another financial mathematics video. This one we're looking at changing yield rates on a portfolio from section 5.2. Let's take a look. So two main ideas. First, portfolio risk, and then second, the Macaulay duration, which is a thing that tries to quantify portfolio risk. Okay, first, portfolio risk. So when the yield rate increases on a bond, the present value decreases. And that should make sense if you think about a higher yield rate, that's a higher interest rate. That if the interest rate is really big, that must mean that there's a lot of risk associated because they're having to pay a lot of interest rate in order to get that money, right? So this is kind of like, consumer credit. People with bad credit are less likely to pay, and so they have to pay a higher interest rate. That's kind of the idea. So as the yield rate increases, the present value decreases because you've got more time for that interest to accumulate to the maturity value. Another way to think of it is if you're really risky, I would pay a smaller amount for a bond than if you weren't very risky. That's another way to think of it. So that's an important thing to have to keep in mind, as the yield rate and the present value are connected. And then the next thing is changes in the interest rate have a larger effect on payments that are made farther into the future. So if it's farther away, let's say the interest rate changes or something, 1%. Well, 1% is going to accumulate a lot longer and make a bigger difference if the payment's coming farther into the future. If it's only 1 year, well, 1% interest can't accumulate that much. So changes to interest rates have a larger effect on payments farther into the future, which means that if we're trying to figure out about sensitivity to interest rates in the market, we want to be able to have a sense of how far away the payments are in our portfolio. Do we have a bunch of things that are maturing soon or a bunch of things that are maturing far into the future? If all our investments are maturing far into the future, then that means we're potentially at risk of changes in interest rate because if they go up or down, they're having a lot longer time to take effect. So we want to be able to know, on average, where are our payments happening. And then just this last point, the further into a future the redemption date is for a bond, the more sensitive to market changes it is, right? So if interest rates go up or go down, they have a longer period of time to take effect. And so that if a bond is far from its redemption date, that changes in interest rate will have a bigger effect on the present value of that bond. Okay, so the Macaulay duration is a way of quantifying how far into the future are your payments coming. Okay, so it's really just a weighted average time that future investment payments will occur. Okay, so if you look at the graphic there, what we've got is just a single bond here. It looks like there's going to be 5 coupon payments and then the large lump sum at the end in 3 years. So the coupon payments are small dots because they're small amounts, and then the lump sum is a big dot because it's a large amount. If that were a teeter-totter or a seesaw, where would you put the fulcrum so that it balances out? Well, you'd have to put it close to that big dot because that's going to pull down a lot. But then as it extends out to the left, that'll balance it out, right? And the Macaulay duration essentially just goes where the fulcrum would go. It's figuring out the average amount of time that those payments go, but it's a weighted average where you weight it by the quantity of the payment. Okay? The formula is just the time until the payment occurs times the amount of that payment, all added up and then divided by the total amount of payments. Okay, so let's say that lump sum is $10,000 and it's 3 years away, so that would be $3,000 divided by the total of all the coupon payments and the lump sum. So that's essentially the formula for Macaulay duration. The dollar amounts sort of, because the present values are both in dollars, those units cancel out, and so the only units left are time. So it's really a time. It's telling you on average where are the payments happening, how many years into the future. And because we were talking about risk and sensitivity, knowing how far those payments are away tells us how risky we are to interest rate changes, essentially. All right. So Macaulay duration is sort of a tool to quantify risk, especially risk with respect to changes in interest rate. And just being able to think of, having a balanced portfolio with some payments coming sooner, some coming later, that is a way of sort of averaging out things, when you're doing investment. All right. So we'll see you in class as we tackle the exploration, and, happy to answer questions there. And we'll see you then.